Look, I'm about to tell you something, and you're probably going to decide I'm a monster. But if I'm being completely honest, I don't really care anymore. Everyone I know has already made up their minds about me, so what's one more opinion? My name is Cora. I'm 23. And 6 months ago, I thought I finally had it. The perfect relationship. His name was Owen. And when I say perfect, I mean he didn't ask too many questions. He didn't get possessive over stupid things. He let me breathe. He let me live my life without feeling like I was constantly being monitored by some kind of low-budget security guard. Owen was one of those quiet types. Steady, the kind of man who worked from home, doing something with computers, tech support, programming, something like that. I never really bothered with the details. What mattered was that he made good money, he had a nice apartment all to himself, and he seemed genuinely happy. Just being with me. After a long, exhausting history of dating guys who were either suffocating control freaks or complete ambitionless losers, Owen felt like this perfect, peaceful middle ground. A place where I could finally relax, just be myself. We'd been together for 6 months, and things were settling into this comfortable rhythm. I'd work my retail job during the day, dealing with Karens and stocking shelves. He'd do his computer thing from home, tapping away in his office. And in the evenings, we'd order takeout, binge some new show on Netflix, and talk about nothing and everything all at once. It wasn't thrilling. Not exactly. But it was peaceful. No drama. No fights about where I'd been or who was texting my phone at 1:00 p.m. Owen trusted me. Completely. Which, if you knew my track record, was both incredibly refreshing and kind of hilarious. The thing is, I've always been good at compartmentalizing, at keeping the different parts of my life in their own neat little boxes. What happened with Garrett, and Reese, and Sterling, and Finn, all of that stayed in the past, right where it belonged. Owen never pushed for details about my exes. And I certainly wasn't about to volunteer information that would only create problems where there weren't any. Why would I tell him about the messy endings, the cheating, the screaming matches? That was old Cora. This was new Cora. The Cora who had learned from her mistakes. The Cora who was finally ready for a mature, stable relationship. At least, that's what I kept telling myself. But here's the thing about me. The thing I didn't account for. I get bored. Easily. It wasn't a boredom with Owen specifically. He was genuinely sweet. He treated me better than anyone ever had. But it was the routine, the sameness. After 6 months of the exact same patterns, day in and day out, my eyes started to wander again. I started noticing things. The cute customer at work, the one with the tattoos on his forearms who always found a reason to flirt with me at the checkout counter. The guy at the coffee shop down the street. The one who always remembered my complicated order and smiled at me like he was interested in more than just serving me caffeine. My neighbor. The one who'd just moved into the apartment across the hall and always seemed to be coming or going at the exact same time as me. I wasn't planning on doing anything about it. I promise. I'm not some kind of monster who deliberately sets out to hurt people. But I also wasn't making any effort to shut it down. So, when the customer asked for my number, I gave it to him. Just as friends, I said with a little laugh. When the coffee shop guy suggested we should hang out sometime, I said, maybe. And when my neighbor invited me over for drinks to christen his new place, I told him I'd think about it. Looking back now, I can see it so clearly. I was already setting up my backup options. Building my escape routes without even admitting it to myself. That's just how I operate. I like having choices. I like having people interested in me. I like having doors I can walk through if my current situation stops working for me. It doesn't mean I didn't love Owen. It doesn't. It just means I'm practical. About relationships. And about what happens when they inevitably run their course. The night everything changed, it started so normally it's almost laughable. Owen had been buried in some huge project all week, working late, stressed out, and he was finally done. So he decided we should celebrate. He'd gone out and bought this expensive bottle of wine he'd been saving for a special occasion. He cooked dinner, actually cooked, not just ordered out, and he lit candles. The whole romantic setup. I remember thinking how sweet he was being. How lucky I was to have someone who actually made an effort, who wanted to make me happy, instead of just expecting me to be grateful for their presence. But I also remember another thought, a darker one, whispering in the back of my mind as I watched him pour the wine. I remember thinking how naive he was, how he had absolutely no idea who I really was, what I was capable of. Owen saw me as this honest, straightforward person, because that's the version of me I'd shown him. But the real me, the me who had cheated on every serious boyfriend I'd ever had, that version was completely hidden from him. And sometimes, in quiet moments like this, I wondered what would happen if he ever found out. That's when the wine started hitting me, harder than usual. Owen was asking about my day, my week. Normal couple conversation. But then, he started asking about my past. Nothing invasive, nothing suspicious, just curious questions. How long had my other relationships lasted? Why did they end? What had I learned from them? It was that kind of getting to know you better talk. The kind couples have when things are getting more serious. When they start thinking about a future. And that's when my mouth decided to completely betray my brain. So there I was. The wine making my tongue loose and my judgment questionable. And Owen asking these innocent questions. At first, I gave him the usual vague answers, the ones I'd perfected over the years. We just grew apart. The timing wasn't right. We wanted different things. You know the lines. The standard, mature-sounding breakup explanations that don't actually explain anything at all. But Owen, in that gentle, genuinely interested way of his, he kept asking follow-up questions. What kind of different things? How did you know you were growing apart? Was it hard to end things? He wasn't being nosy. He was just trying to understand me. To really see me. And the wine was making me feel chatty and reckless. And maybe a part of me was just tired of pretending to be someone I wasn't. Maybe I had this weird, twisted urge to shock him, to see how he'd react to the real Cora. I don't know what came over me. But I started talking. You want to know why Garrett and I broke up? I heard myself say, my voice a little too loud. I cheated on him, with his roommate Marcus, multiple times, in their apartment while Garrett was at work. Owen's expression didn't change much. It just got a little more focused, a little more still. So I kept going. The words were just pouring out of me now, like a confession I didn't know I needed to make. And Reese, I was seeing his best friend behind his back for 3 months before Reese found out from someone else. I took another sip of wine. Sterling caught me texting another guy, but honestly, I was already planning to break up with him anyway, so it didn't really matter. I could see Owen getting quieter and quieter, but I couldn't stop myself. It felt good to finally tell someone the truth. And Finn, I continued, refilling my wine glass until it was dangerously full. Poor sweet Finn. He thought we were going to move in together. He was literally showing me apartment listings and talking about getting a joint bank account. Meanwhile, I was meeting up with this guy from my gym 3 times a week. For months. By the time I finished talking, the candles were burning low, and I'd basically confessed to being a serial cheater. 4 different guys, 4 different relationships, 4 different ways I had completely betrayed their trust and broken their hearts. And the craziest part? I didn't feel guilty telling Owen. I felt relieved. Like finally someone knew who I really was, instead of this fake, nice girl version I'd been performing for him. He just sat there, for what felt like an eternity. The silence stretched out, thick and uncomfortable, and I started to wonder if maybe, just maybe, I'd made a huge mistake. Then he finally spoke, and he asked the one question I should have seen coming, but somehow hadn't prepared for. His voice was quiet, Level. So, what makes you think you won't do the same thing to me? And you know what I told him? I said it was different with him. That I'd matured. That I loved him in a way I'd never loved anyone else. All the classic lines. All the things I'd probably said to boyfriend number 3 and boyfriend number 4 when they'd gotten suspicious. But, in that moment, wine-drunk and emotional and vulnerable, I actually believed it. Those guys weren't right for me, I explained, my voice pleading. I was young and I didn't know what I wanted. But with you, everything's different. You make me want to be better. I reached across the table, my hand covering his. I would never hurt you the way I hurt them, Owen. What we have is real. He didn't pull his hand away. But he didn't squeeze mine back, either. He just looked at me with this expression I couldn't read. Not angry. But not reassured, either. Have you ever thought about why you cheated on all of them? He asked, his voice still quiet. I hadn't. Not really. I'd always just chalked it up to being with the wrong people. I don't know, I admitted. I guess I just wasn't ready to settle down with any of them. And you think you're ready now? With you? Yes, absolutely. But even as I said it, I could hear how hollow it sounded. Like a line from a script I'd performed before. And for the first time that night, a cold dread started to seep into my bones. The dread that maybe I'd revealed too much, too fast. And that Owen was about to decide I wasn't worth the risk. I woke up the next morning with that familiar, sick feeling in my stomach that had nothing to do with the hangover. You know the feeling. When you remember saying something you absolutely should not have said. Except this time, I'd basically taken a sledgehammer to my entire relationship in one wine-fueled conversation. Owen was already awake, sitting in the kitchen with his coffee and his laptop. When I walked in, wearing one of his t-shirts and trying to look cute and apologetic, he barely glanced up from his screen. And that's when the real panic set in. In 6 months, Owen had never given me the cold shoulder. He wasn't a moody person. If something was bothering him, he'd just say it. I tried to play it off. To pretend. God, I was so drunk last night, I said, laughing a little too loudly as I poured myself a coffee. I hope I didn't say anything too embarrassing. He didn't fall for it. He looked up at me, and his eyes held an expression I'd never seen before. Not anger. Disappointment. Maybe disgust. You don't remember telling me about cheating on every boyfriend you've ever had? The coffee mug felt heavy in my hands. I could have come clean then. Could have had an honest conversation. But instead, I did what I always do when I'm backed into a corner. I got defensive. That was different, I told him, sitting down across from him. Those weren't real relationships. I was young and stupid. I was just figuring myself out. Owen closed his laptop. The soft click echoed in the silent room. Cora, you cheated on 4 different guys. That's not figuring yourself out. That's a pattern. It's not a pattern. I shot back, even though we both knew it was. It's just coincidence. Those guys weren't right for me. So, subconsciously, I was sabotaging those relationships because deep down I knew they weren't going to last anyway. So, cheating was your way of ending things you didn't want to be in? No, that's not what I'm saying. I was getting frustrated. He was twisting my words, making me sound worse than I was. I'm saying I wasn't in love with any of them. Not the way I'm in love with you. What we have is completely different, Owen. You have to know that. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he looked me straight in the eye. Have you cheated on me? And here's where I made my second, and perhaps biggest, mistake of the weekend. Instead of just saying no and leaving it at that, I got offended. I acted like he was the one in the wrong for even asking. I can't believe you would even think that, I said, my voice getting higher, more indignant. After everything we've been through? After all the ways I've shown you that I love you? I was turning it around on him, making him the bad guy for having a perfectly reasonable reaction to the information I had just given him. But that's what I do. When I'm cornered, I make people question their own sanity. I'm not accusing you, Owen said carefully, his voice dangerously calm. I'm just trying to understand how someone who has cheated on every person they've ever dated suddenly stops. Oh, because I grew up, I snapped. Because I learned from my mistakes. Because I found someone worth being faithful to. I reached for his hand again, but this time he pulled it away. Please, I whispered, the fight draining out of me. Please don't let my past ruin what we have. I swear to you, I'm not that person anymore. The conversation went in circles for over an hour, him asking logical questions, me deflecting and getting emotional. Finally, I started crying. Not fake tears. Real ones. Because I could feel him slipping away and I genuinely didn't want to lose him. Please, I begged, don't let something that happened before you even met me destroy this. By the end of it, I thought I'd convinced him. He said he needed time to think. I took that as a victory. Time meant he wasn't leaving. Not yet. What I didn't realize was that Owen had already made up his mind. I had already lost him. He was just trying to figure out how to detonate the bomb I had just handed him. The next few days were absolute torture. Owen didn't break up with me, but he might as well have. He was a ghost in his own apartment. He'd respond to my texts with one-word answers, if he responded at all. When I tried to bring up our conversation, he'd just shut down. I'm still processing, he'd say, before changing the subject to something painfully neutral. Work. The weather. What we wanted for dinner. It was like trying to hug a statue. He was physically there, but emotionally, he had completely checked out. I tried everything. I cooked his favorite meals. I suggested we go out, do the fun things we used to enjoy. I even bought new lingerie, thinking maybe if I could reconnect with him physically, the emotional distance would shrink. Nothing. It was like trying to start a fire with wet wood. The worst part was the not knowing. With my exes, when they found out, there were big dramatic confrontations, screaming matches, thrown objects. At least then, I could gauge their anger. I knew what I was dealing with. But Owen's silence, it was driving me crazy. How do you fix something when you don't even know exactly what's broken? I started getting paranoid. Every time I caught him on his phone, I'd immediately assume he was texting someone, telling them what a horrible person I was. When he'd leave for a work meeting, I'd wonder if he was actually meeting someone else, getting advice on how to dump me without looking like the bad guy. After a week of this weird, agonizing limbo, I couldn't take it anymore. I decided I had to take control of the situation, instead of just waiting around for him to make a decision. I planned one last grand romantic evening. Candles, his favorite takeout from that Thai place he loved, and a heartfelt, carefully rehearsed speech about how sorry I was and how much our relationship meant to me. I was going to make him understand, make him see that what we had was worth fighting for. I started my speech as soon as he walked in the door. Owen, I need you to understand that I love you more than I've ever loved anyone, I began, my voice trembling just the right amount. What I did in the past has nothing to do with us. I would never hurt you the way I hurt them, because you mean everything to me. He just looked at me. His expression was just tired. So incredibly tired. Cora, stop. I ignored him. I was determined to get through my whole speech. I had to. Most girls would have just lied to you about their past, I continued, my voice gaining momentum. But I was honest with you. I was honest because I trusted you. I trusted you to understand that people make mistakes and that they can change. End quote. Stop, he said again, louder this time, sharper. Just stop talking. And that's when I knew I was losing him. For real this time. And instead of accepting it with grace, instead of trying to have an actual conversation, I did what I always do when I get desperate. I started making promises I had no intention of keeping. And I started making subtle threats designed to manipulate him into staying. If you leave me over something that happened before I even met you, you're going to regret it, I told him, the tears starting to stream down my face now. You'll never find someone who loves you the way I do. You won't. Owen didn't respond. He didn't argue. He didn't get drawn into the drama I was so desperately trying to create. He just stood up calmly, walked to the bedroom, and started putting clothes into a duffel bag. Not dramatically, not angrily, just methodically, like he was packing for a business trip. "What are you doing?" I asked, following him, my heart hammering against my ribs. "I'm leaving," he said, not even looking at me as he folded a t-shirt. "Where are you going? For how long?" "I don't know yet," he said. "I just need to not be here right now." I tried every manipulation tactic I could think of in the next 10 minutes. I cried. I yelled. I tried to physically block him from leaving the apartment. I promised to go to therapy, to change everything about myself, to do whatever he wanted, anything, if he would just stay and work things out with me. But nothing worked. It was like I wasn't even there. He just kept packing, a calm, resolute island in the middle of my emotional hurricane. The last thing he said to me, his hand on the doorknob, was, "I'll come back for the rest of my stuff this weekend, when you're not here." And then he was gone. No final fight. No dramatic declaration about how I'd broken his heart. Just gone. Like our 6 months together had meant absolutely nothing. I called him 50 times that first night, maybe more. Every single call went straight to voicemail. I texted him long, rambling paragraphs, apologizing, explaining, begging. Nothing. It was like he'd vanished from the face of the earth. The anger started to set in after a few days. Who was he to just cut me off like that? After 6 months, didn't I deserve more than being ghosted like some random hookup? So I started telling my side of the story. I told our friends how Owen had abandoned me, how he'd punished me for my honesty, how he was too immature to handle a real conversation. I painted myself as the victim, the brave, honest girlfriend who was cast aside by a man who couldn't handle the truth. And honestly, the more I told the story, the more I started to believe it myself. 3 weeks after he walked out, I had convinced myself that I was better off without him. Better off without someone who couldn't handle dating a real person with a real past, instead of some perfect fantasy girl who'd never made a mistake in her life. But then, I started hearing things. Little comments from Avery, one of our mutual friends from his work. How Owen seemed so much happier lately. How he was really focusing on himself, on his career. It annoyed me. Obviously, he was just putting on a show. Then, one day over coffee, Avery dropped the bomb. "Oh, Owen's seeing someone new," she said casually, like she was talking about the weather. "She seems really sweet. I think they met through work. Her name is Clara." I tried to play it cool. "That was fast," I said, stirring my latte so hard it nearly slopped over the side. "I don't know," Avery shrugged. "He said they'd been friends for a while, that she really helped him through some stuff recently. Sometimes the best relationships grow out of friendships, you know?" And that's when it hit me. While I'd been desperately trying to contact him, he'd been confiding in another woman. Some coworker who'd swooped in to comfort him and had probably turned him against me even more. I felt sick, but the real punch to the gut came 2 months later. I was on a date with some guy from a dating app, partly because I was lonely, and partly to prove to myself that I could move on. We were at this nice restaurant downtown. And I saw them. In a corner booth. Owen and her, Clara. My first instinct was to run. But I couldn't. I was frozen. I just stared. Owen looked happy. Genuinely, completely, relaxed, and happy, in a way I'd maybe seen twice in our entire relationship. The girl, Clara, was petite and brunette, nothing like me, and she was laughing at something he'd said. And he was smiling at her like she was the most fascinating person in the entire world. They were holding hands across the table. Like teenagers. Completely absorbed in each other. I watched them for 20 minutes, barely hearing a word my own date was saying. I kept waiting for Owen to look uncomfortable, distracted. For a flicker of something to show he was thinking about me. But he never did. He looked like a man who had found exactly what he wanted. 6 months after that, I heard they'd moved in together. A year after that, someone mentioned they were engaged. Meanwhile, I'd gone through 3 more relationships, each one ending the same way they always did, with me getting bored, and with them, eventually, catching me with someone else. Even now, 2 years later, I still check Owen's social media sometimes. He looks happy with his wife. They travel. They have couple friends. They post pictures from dinner parties and weekend trips. All that domestic bliss stuff I used to make fun of. And here's the worst part, the part I barely admit to myself. I know I could never have that, because I don't actually want it. I want the chase, the excitement of a new attraction, the thrill of a secret, the power that comes with keeping people guessing. But I'm not going to sit here and pretend I'm the villain in this story. I'm not. Owen knew what he was getting into. Maybe not the specific details, but he knew I wasn't some innocent girl next door. And when I was finally, truly honest with him, when I trusted him enough to tell him the truth, he couldn't handle it. That says more about his character than it does about mine. Some people just can't handle being with someone who has lived a real life. Instead of some fairy tale fantasy, he wanted someone safe, predictable, boring. When he realized I was more complicated than that, he ran. So yeah, maybe I have a pattern. But at least I'm honest about who I am now. At least I don't abandon people the second things get difficult. Owen got scared of my past and decided I wasn't worth the risk. And that's his loss, not mine.